Good afternoon, all of you. We are honored to welcome Professor Martin Dresler, a leading cognitive neuroscientist from Donders Institute, Nijmegen, Netherlands, who will be speaking on lucid dreaming. Chairing this session is Professor Kaviraj Adupa from NIMHANS, an expert in clinical neurophysiology and neuromodulation. We are honored to have Professor Kaviraj chairing this session. He is a leading neuroscientist and faculty member in the Department of Neurophysiology at NIMHANS with specialized expertise in clinical neurophysiology and neuromodulation. His research focuses on understanding the intracortical and basal ganglia, motor cortical circuits in movement and mood disorder using advanced techniques such as TMS, deep brain stimulation, and he completed his postdoctoral fellow at University of Toronto in Professor Chan's lab.
It's okay.
Okay, so I hand over to Professor Kaviraj Adupa.
Yeah. Good afternoon, all. We are looking forward to talk by Professor Martin Dresler, who is Associate Professor of Cognitive Neuroscience at Radboud University. And he is a leading cognitive neuroscientist who heads this lab. And he has done his PhD from Philipps University, Marburg, and went on to do postdoctoral fellowship at Max Planck, Oxford, and Stanford. So very prestigious universities. Before joining this Donders Institute in 2013, he has over 295 scientific papers, garnering over 8,300 citations. And he has a very interesting, innovative project of Sleep 2.0, which explores novel approaches to sleep research using wearable technology. And we are looking forward to his groundbreaking work, and who is going to talk on lucid dreaming. Professor Dresler, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation and for the kind introduction. Can you hear me well? Okay, fantastic. I'm trying to share my screen. I had some issues here. Let's see if that works. So can you see my full presentation, or is it presentation mode? Is it working well? I have some issues with my screen here, unfortunately. It's working well. Okay, then let's try it this way. Good. I would like to talk a bit about lucid dreaming, in particular about the neuroscience of lucid dreaming. And I'll take a bit of an historical angle here. Since lucid dreaming, or the neuroscientific research of lucid dreaming, turned 50 this year, and EEG research is about 100-year-old.
Professor Dresler, I think it's not in presentation mode.
Okay, that's let me briefly check how I can change this. Wait a second. Sharing, try share again. This won't work. Sorry for that.
Yeah, otherwise we can continue with that. It was visible.
Yeah, I'll briefly try to get my second screen running, which would also make things for me a bit more comfortable, but somehow it doesn't work. Then let me... So then let's try again, but and Zoom for some reason makes some issues. Maybe that is oh, sorry, that is related. So now
it's perfect. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, sorry for that. So EEG was discovered or developed about 100 years ago, 101 years ago exactly. And only since then, of course, we can speak of a proper neuroscience of sleep and of dreaming in that regard. Lucid dreaming per se is a topic that has been written about already since thousands of years all over the world. In Western science, like in the late 19th century, it was written about, in the early 20th century, in Eastern research, the history goes much longer back than that. But the neuroscience, in the proper way, we really look at neural signals and associate them with subjective experiences, something that really properly started about 100 years ago. Hans Berger developing the EEG. And in the early 1930s, for the first time, that was used to study sleep as well. And EEG microprocesses like sleep spindles or like single oscillation was something that was already studied in the early 1930s. What's important for dreaming and lucid dreaming in particular is, of course, the discovery of REM sleep. And that happened in the 1950s. When for the first time people looked for full nights of sleep, since back then sleep EEG was, or any kind of EEG was still written on paper, and paper was expensive, and therefore most studies just lasted for a couple of minutes. And then in the early 1950s, for the first time, full nights were recorded, and then 1.5 hours into the recording, suddenly the EEG traces changed considerably. And the striking patterns of what we now know as REM sleep was discovered. So it was almost wake-like activity seen in the EEG, combined with rapid eye movements that gave this sleep stage its name. Very quickly afterwards, it was also discovered that this is related to a complete loss of muscle tone, so really an active paralysis. And this paralysis and the brainstem regions responsible for this paralysis were also in the late 1950s, early 60s discovered. And since then, we have REM sleep as this very special state of sleep where still it's a bit puzzling what exactly it does. But very quickly it was discovered that REM sleep is associated with very vivid dream experiences. We also dream during non-REM sleep, so there's cognitive activity going on throughout the night. However, during REM sleep, it's particularly vivid and particularly story-like, so these very paradigmatic forms of dreams where we really basically experience a Hollywood movie or something. That is something that is more often happening in REM sleep. And then, quite exactly half a century ago, in the mid-70s, lucid dreaming was studied for the first time under laboratory conditions. There was already a lot of talk about lucid dreaming before that, a lot of behavioral experiments and books written about it. But with proper neuroscientific methods for the first time in the 1970s, it was studied. And just for those of you, I guess everyone knows what I'm talking about, but just to bring everyone on the same page, lucid dreaming is, of course, the simplest definition of lucid dreaming is a dream where during dreaming we realize that we are dreaming without waking up immediately. Somewhat historically, what brought Keith Hearn and Stephen LaBerge to pioneers of lucid dreaming research back then, both in their PhD thesis to studying lucid dreaming with objective methods, was the scanning hypothesis that was discussed during that time. So the idea that the rapid eye movements that we see and that are the only bodily movements that are possible and observable during REM sleep, which otherwise is really a completely atonic state, that these eye movements are related to dream content. And there was a nice anecdotal report here by Bill Dement, one also of the pioneers of sleep research, who had this case of a super regular EOG. So here you see at the top the right eye movements, on the middle the left eye movements, And you see these super regular eye movements. And after awakening, the participant was asked, so what did you dream about? And that participant said, oh, I was dreaming about a ping pong game and looking to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right, and so on. And these discussions led then Keith Hearn and Stephen Labert to the idea of eye signaling of lucid dreaming. So the idea was that if you are in a dream, you realize you are dreaming, so you are in a lucid dream, you can signal this state to the outside by using your eyes. And these are really the only movements possible during REM sleep. The rest is completely paralyzed. The eyes are slightly differently connected. Therefore, they're exempt from this REM sleep atonia. And if you then really look far to the left, far to the right, far to the left, far to the right, so people are typically instructed to try to look at their left and right ears, then you get this signal in the electrooculogram that really very clearly shows what is going on, and that is also clearly different from these unintentional eye movements outside of these left-right signals. And in the EMG, you typically then still see that this is really proper REM sleep. It's not some kind of mixed state or restful wakefulness or something like that, because you have this complete loss of muscle tone. And since then, this has become somewhat of the gold standard in lucid dreaming research and is used at least in all neuroscientific studies. Lucid dreaming, however, is a very rare state. Only about half of the population ever has a lucid dream, and even those 50% of humanity who knows lucid dreaming from own experience has it rather rarely. So there's like very few people who are able to have lucid dreams on a weekly or even nightly basis. And that makes it very difficult, of course, to study it or to use it for anything if it's such a rare phenomenon. But in particular for neuroscientific studies, it's very difficult to work with such a rare phenomenon, since we cannot just spend nights and nights and nights for a full month in the sleep laboratory to wait for a single dream. So quite quickly after like these studies, there were attempts to increase lucid dreaming frequency or to induce lucid dreaming, and this is really still rapidly evolving and developing field, and with a lot of activity of most lucid dreaming. Most labs that study lucid dreaming, because just a necessity to do proper research to get people lucid. And there are a lot of strategies, and there are cognitive strategies, there are technological strategies, there are strategies trying to cue during sleep, give certain, like stimulate certain senses, or directly stimulate the brain. And what was already a very early strategy is sort of these cognitive strategies, very simple, that if you go to sleep, you just tell yourself now that like the next dream I have, I will remember that I wanted to get lucid, or I will recognize to be in a dream. And these sort of self-instructions often lead to success. And this is sort of a like form of prospective memory, that you really tell yourself, you like as soon as you're in a dream, you want to remember that you wanted to get lucid. And quite often that does work. It is far from being a perfect method, though, and therefore all kinds of technologies have since then, and strategies have since then been developed to support this kind of cognitive methods and to help people get lucid. One study that we did a few years ago is to use virtual reality to help people get lucid. And to briefly stop this video, the idea behind this is that one of the cognitive strategies is to during the day look for weird situations or dreamlike situations and immediately react with a reality check or with a critical question if you are currently dreaming or not. So as soon as you see something that is dreamlike, try to make it a habit to ask yourself, is this a dream or is this reality? And if that becomes a habit, this habit will transfer to the dream state. And as soon as you see something dreamlike in a dream, you will ask yourself if this is a dream or not. And that, of course, then is the first step towards lucidity. The problem in real life is, of course, that most days are very boring and not very dreamlike. And so far, you have very little opportunity for this. And therefore, we in this study, we used virtual reality to just program dreamlike situations. And this is our university cafeteria. And here the participant was supposed to play a waiter, and then weird things happened. Like here, all the customers changed into puppets, and all of this typically happened like outside the view of the participant. So like as soon as you turn your back to something, then something changes, and that is very similar as in dreams. And so people could train here this critical questioning of their own state. Also, this was not perfect. We did have significant results in the training group. So we had 3 different groups, a passive control group here, an active control group, meaning they trained lucid dreaming, like cognitive strategies of getting lucid dreaming, however, were not supported by virtual reality. And then we had this virtual reality group who did all the cognitive training with the help of virtual reality. And indeed, they sort of did better in becoming lucid compared to the passive control group who didn't receive any training. But you see already here in this plot that not everyone really increased their insight scores. And here we have a bit more detailed overview. So each square here is 1 participant, and each dot is 1 morning questionnaire about lucid dreaming. And you see that in the passive control group here on the top, there's hardly anything going on in most people. In the active control group, so people training lucid dreaming but without virtual reality, you see that about half of people got more lucid over time. And in the virtual reality group, you see that a couple of people more profited from this training, and those who profited slightly more. But also, this is not the magic bullet. So the search for really effective lucid dreaming strategy, induction strategies is still ongoing. And we might just need to combine a lot of strategies to get the best effects. By now, in many of our studies, we have about a 50% success rate to get people lucid in the lab. So this is like much better than sort of the baseline chance, but it's still quite tedious to do these studies. Diving deeper into the neuroscience, in the like around 2000s, there were the first neuroimagings, or mid-90s already starting the first neuroimaging studies on lucid dreaming, fMRI, then really in the early 2000s. And a few years afterwards, I was lucky to work with some of the pioneers of sleep neuroimaging in Munich. And they were kind enough to let me, as a young PhD student, use the scanner for lucid dreaming research. And also there, the sample sizes are very small. So we had 6 or 7 participants in total, and like reliable data really basically from 1 single participant who had a few lucid dreams in the scanner. So what the data I'm showing here is from that 1 participant. And here we contrasted lucid versus non-lucid REM sleep. And we saw a couple of things that we expected. So in particular here, these dorsolateral prefrontal and frontopolar increases in brain activity related to lucid dreaming. We also found a couple of not so expected increases in activity in parietal and temporal regions, maybe in particular these temporal. Were unexpected to us. They might be related to visual stream of consciousness and so on, but keep that in mind for later. In particular, these frontopolar activations nicely fit with anatomical data. So in this study here, together with colleagues from Max Planck Institute in Berlin, we compared very frequent lucid dreamers with non-lucid dreamers or very infrequent lucid dreamers, and found like more gray matter here in the frontopolar cortex as well. And that fits also nicely with other studies during wakefulness that look at metacognitive processes in people, where both with functional and structural MRI, you can see similar changes in these frontopolar brain regions related to metacognitive ability. So how good people are to sort of observe themselves and to estimate their or judge their own cognitive abilities. Benjamin Baird then a few years later took this like the one point in the brain that showed the strongest differences between lucid and non-lucid dreaming, and took this as a seed region. And he also looked at very experienced lucid dreamers and contrasted them with people who have never had a lucid dream, and just looked how brain connectivity differed in these two groups compared to this one seed region here. So how is the brain in very frequent lucid dreamers connected to this very important lucid dreaming spot? And he basically ended up with the same network of brain regions. And so far, even though this is just a case study here on top, it nicely fits with these group studies. We also use lucid dreaming as a tool, so not just interested in the neurocorrelates of lucid dream lucidity per se, but also what can we use lucid dreaming for. In this case, we used it for dream imaging in a more general sense. What you see on the left-hand side is just a classical finding here from us, but hundreds of other studies show the same, that if you move your left or right hand, then the contralateral motor cortices show strong activity. And that is what you see here. So left hand movement means right hand or right motor cortex activity, and right hand movement means left motor cortex activity. And we just ask lucid dreamers to move their left or their right hand in the scanner and use this eye signaling technique as a temporal marker. So as soon as they got lucid, they made eye signals, and then they started moving their right hand, and then we saw that left motor cortex was active. Then after 10 seconds or so, they moved their eyes again, and then we knew that the left hand movement would start, and therefore on the contralateral side we saw this activity in the motor cortex. So nicely really showing from the outside that all the all the correct or expected brain motor regions are associated to just dreamed motor activity. So in this case, of course, the actual hands of participants were not moving because they were in REM sleep and completely paralyzed. Much more study with slightly larger sample sizes have been conducted with EEG already from very early on, since the early 80s. These studies have been done. The problem was that you get very inconsistent results. There was very early studies found some differences in the alpha range, then later studies differences in the beta range, and most of these studies couldn't replicate each other. The most influential study is this one by Ursula Voss from about 15 years ago, where she compared wakefulness and lucid REM sleep and non-lucid REM sleep, and she found differences in particular here in this 48 hertz range, so gamma power, where in particular in these dorsolateral prefrontal regions, lucid dreaming was somewhat in between non-lucid REM sleep and wakefulness. The problem with this study, which is probably the most highly cited in all of lucid dreaming research, is that it couldn't really be replicated. There was a few years later with a slightly larger sample size, a study in narcolepsy patients, who did not show this difference in gamma activity when lucid and non-lucid dreaming was compared. A few years ago, Benjamin Baird and Stephen LaBerge together looked more deeply in an even larger sample size, still very small, but much larger than the previous studies. And what they showed was something that was already discussed during the first publication 15 years ago, but not really taken serious, and they looked more deeply into this. And this is that eye movements are related to 40 hertz artifacts. So whenever you have a saccade or even tiny eye movements, then what you see on the brain or in the EEG, it's not in the brain, of course, but what you see at the EEG sensors is this increase in 40 hertz activity, and that might, of course, explain the entire finding of the increased gamma activity during lucid dreaming, because there's a lot of eye movements during lucid dreaming, and they went through a lot of efforts to clean the EEG from these artifacts, and the better they cleaned them, with different methods, the less of this 40 Hertz activity was found. So far, it appears that this at least prefrontal 40 Hertz activity is mostly due to eye artifacts and not really a brain signal. We just published a study where we further increased sample size, but also further increased the number of channels. So these are all the EEG studies here in the bottom left range that were published in the last 50 years, basically. And you see it's typically very few participants and typically a small number of channels. And so we have pooled data from different labs that worked with high density EEG, or at least with 64 channels. And therefore got this nice sample of 26 participants with higher density EEG. And we looked on the one hand on the sensor level, so like classical EEG analysis. And there we were not able to find any differences here in the gamma range between lucid dreaming and non-lucid dreaming. What we did find is here in the theta range some decreases, which are a bit puzzling and haven't been reported before. But the high density EEG, or at least the higher density EEG, allowed us also to look at the source level, so to sort of look into the brain and see what kind of EEG activity is related to lucid dreaming there. And we found basically three differences here. Again, in the decreased theta activity here in these posterior brain regions. We also found some decreased beta activity. And we did find increased gamma activity, at least in this low gamma range. However, not in the prefrontal cortex, but more here in this temporal regions. Somewhat potentially aligning to the fMRI findings I showed before. So why is it that in particular the EEG literature is so inconsistent, and why is it so difficult to find at least at the sensor level systematic differences between lucid and non-lucid dreaming? I think there are a couple of reasons for that. On the one hand, of course, there's highly unsystematic dream content. So during normal wakefulness studies, people do exactly the same task over and over again. And in lucid dreaming, every dream is different, or in dream research in general, every dream is different. But also in the data we had to analyze, people were doing all kinds of different tasks in their lucid dreams. So there was just a lot going on that was completely unrelated to lucidity per se. In contrast, this sort of background marker of lucidity might be very subtle. So it's really just this thought in your background, oh yes, I'm lucid and I know that it's a dream, but you focus on doing a task or you focus on the dream content. And therefore this sort of tonic EEG marker might be there, but might be just very weak or very subtle and therefore difficult to detect with small sample sizes. And what might be a stronger signal is really the moment of insight. However, that time point is very, very difficult to pinpoint. And we tried that also in our most recent EEG study and did find some associations again with gamma activity. But also there, take that with a grain of salt because we do not really know when exactly people get lucid. Potential solutions for that is, of course, to control lucid, dream content during lucid dreaming much better. So give people a task to constantly think about their state of mind rather than doing all kinds of motor tasks, for example. Increase the sample size, obviously. And another completely different strategy might be to maybe do not focus too much on EEG, but also look at other markers. And very early research by Stephen LaBerge showed that, in particular, in some autonomic markers, you see quite drastic differences, like after people got lucid compared to the time before. So there might be a lot of untapped potential in all of these autonomic markers where everyone, at least for the last 30 years or so, only looked at brain signals. Two things left. Dream communication. This is something where very early, already 40 years ago, also Stephen LaBerge looked into a couple of possibilities. but more systematically 10 years ago, Christopher Appel, back then a master student in Germany and by now a postdoc or sort of a researcher with his own citizen science dream research institute in Germany, developed a two-way communication method for lucid dreaming. So eye signal, like traditional, was really just one-sided, that the dreamer signals something to the waking world. And here Chris, in his master study, sort of taught people Morse code, and then with beeping tones or flashing lights brought something into the dream. So he stimulated people while sleeping and first had taught them Morse code. So with these beeping tones, they received Morse messages. And in this case, it was very simple math questions, 4 + 1, and their task was to respond with a corresponding number of eye movements, and that worked very well. So together with a couple of labs in the US and France and the original lab in Germany, we replicated this a few years ago and were able, with different kinds of ingoing channels like spoken words, beeping tones, flashing lights, or tactile stimuli to bring really information into the dream. And participants could also signal then back out of the dream, so that a very simple and rudimentary communication was possible with properly REM sleeping participants. A bit of an outlook. So what is happening currently and for the next couple of years in a bit more detail. If you're interested, we published last year this spotlight in Neuron, speculating a bit about the future directions. So if you're interested, look that up. Just two brief examples, what we suggest or what we think will happen over the next years. On the one, the rise of wearable neurotechnology will help a lot. So there are by now a lot of different wearable EEG solutions to bring EEG research out of the lab into home environments, and therefore you can acquire much higher sample sizes. And these headbands are, of course, not as good and not as controlled as full lab-based polysomnography, but at least the brain signals that are of interest, typically like slow oscillation, like sleep spindles and other oscillatory processes, can be picked up by them quite well. We have done that already in a couple of studies. We have a large-scale study where we had about 900 participants recorded for 3 weeks each with EEG, and asked them some questions about dreaming as well. So here we have 14,000 nights of sleep EEG recordings combined with dream data. We have very intense single case studies, by now several of them. The most sort of prominent is here the Quantified Scientist, has a very successful YouTube channel also about his self-measurements. And together with him, we record already more than 1,000 sleep EEG recordings in this one participant, also with morning questionnaires. And we are currently preparing some projects where we want to provide the infrastructure for this kind of citizen science approach, where people can basically do neuroscience experiments also on dreaming and lucid dreaming at home, and we provide the best practices and infrastructure for that. That infrastructure includes, for example, software. So we published this dream engineering toolbox that can not only record and analyze sleep EEG, but also help to modulate and interfere with sleep and dreaming. We are still working on that. Work in progress here is in particular artifact identification and rejection, since that is an issue with these wearable systems, to test microarousals, have real-time auto-scoring, so that really you can in real time assess if someone is in REM sleep, and then during certain periods send sensory stimulation, for example. And thereby develop really something like this, like smart or personalized sensory stimulation protocols that are very helpful for lucid dreaming induction. And we are just about to start really a larger, compared for lucid dreaming sample sizes, larger scale home study for lucid dream induction, where we have close to 100 participants sleeping for 2 weeks with these systems and trying all kinds of conditions to get them lucid. And the final sort of brief outlook, where we combine all of this together. is this international study on lucid dreaming expertise. We are quite a bit behind schedule, but there are a lot of labs worldwide who signed up and expressed their interest in this multi-center study where we will use wearable technology to record expert lucid dreamers, so people who have at least twice per week lucid dreams, and follow them for about a month with wearable EEG. And ask them in particular then about their induction strategies and about their experiences during the night, and that hopefully leading then to a data set where we increase like the sample size above 100 participants, and each of them contributing then hopefully dozens of nights, so that here we might be able to finally get really to these very large sample sizes that are dearly needed in lucid dreaming research. With that, I'm done. Thank you very much for your attention, and thanks, of course, to the team who's doing all the real work. I'm only presenting all this stuff typically at nice conferences like this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dresler, for that wonderful talk on lucid dreaming, both the phenomenology, EEG, and imaging correlates. Is there any questions to Dr.? Yeah, please.
Since lucid dreaming and sleep paralysis are similar in like quite a few aspects, is there any way of effectively employing lucid dreaming as a stratagem to tackle sleep paralysis?
That is a very good question. So the traditional view on sleep paralysis was, of course, that it's just sort of REM sleep atonia that like is active for longer than people sort of sleep. So that there's a dissociation between this REM sleep atonia and the rest of the brain in terms of wakefulness or sleep. There was a very interesting, and therefore sort of to answer that very briefly then, that part, like as soon as people realize and know what sleep paralysis is, that takes much of the terror out of it. So I had once sleep paralysis in my life, and that was when I was already in sleep research, and I was super positively excited about it because cool, for the first time I experienced that myself. But if you do not know what it is, then of course it's really terrifying. So part of the solution might already be to just educate people what sleep paralysis is. There's of course still a lot of people that suffer from sleep paralysis even if they know what it is. And for those indeed, lucid dreaming might be, I'm not aware of any sort of research on this, but lucid dreaming might be a help. What's very interesting in this regard, that there was a few years back, there was a study comparing the EEG correlates or the EEG of sleep paralysis, of REM sleep and of wakefulness. And there it appeared that on the EEG level, sleep paralysis and REM sleep are much more similar than sleep paralysis and wakefulness. And that speaks a bit against the traditional view that sleep paralysis is basically wakefulness and just the REM sleep atonia is ongoing. And the sort of the interpretation that you might take from this is that sleep paralysis is actually a form of dreaming, that you do not really observe your sort of home environment or something, and but that it's really a dream about sleep paralysis in a sense. And in this case, again, lucid dreaming might be of help, but I'm not aware of any research in this regard.
Thanks.
Yeah, one last question.
Hi, I am a clinical pharmacologist. I wanted to know, are there any studies with sleep medications on dreaming?
That's not my research focus in so far I don't have the best overview. I mean that there is certainly, obviously, any medication such as benzodiazepines that suppress REM sleep, for example, they most likely will have an effect on dreaming as well. There are studies on non-sleep medications that do have effects on dreaming. The most obvious case is any drug that acts on the acetylcholine system, for example, galantamine. So an Alzheimer drug that is an acetylcholine esterase inhibitor. And since acetylcholine is, of course, heavily involved in REM sleep regulation, what galantamine typically does is to increase REM sleep or to stabilize REM sleep or to extend REM sleep. And that typically is associated with more intense and vivid dreams. And for that very reason, it is also sometimes used as an induction strategy for lucid dreaming. And there are by now 2 or 3 studies looking into this and very consistently showing that indeed galantamine helps to get lucid. It is still a bit unclear what exactly the mechanism there is, if galantamine or acetylcholine is involved in any of the cognitive processes. My guess would be that it's a much more basic process, that it just stabilizes REM sleep and therefore helps you to like stay in REM sleep when your brain is already on a trajectory towards awakening or towards lucidity or so. And during sort of normal sleep, you would then quickly wake up. But if you took like these acetylcholine targeted drugs that would keep you in REM sleep, and therefore you would stay in a lucid dream, or what would even get in a lucid dream in the first place.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Dresler, for that very wonderful talk and nice discussion. Because of the paucity of time, we will go to the next session. Thank you.